Okay, I think we'll just get started, and you might be wondering why am I standing with a microphone and there's no noise coming through. But this session is being webcast, so this is for the benefit of people that are watching remotely. So first of all, thank you for coming to the session for monitoring and reporting. And also those that are watching remotely, thanks for doing so. And also if you're watching this pre-recorded, hello also, and thank you for following this workshop. So anyway, my name is Claire Gibson. I'm the Capacity Building Officer for the Climate Challenge Fund. And this is Claire Warmby. This is our developer of the Carbon Estimator and Reporter. So hopefully we'll be here to deal with some of your questions today. There'll be an opportunity for those that are watching via webcast to ask some questions, and we'll prompt you to do so. And if you are watching this on pre-record, then all I would say is just contact your development officer with any questions that you may have. So really the aims of the session today was to introduce the estimator, get to grips with some of the key features of that. But the main part of this workshop is looking at the carbon reporter itself. So kind of key concepts of that and some troubleshooting elements and the data collection part. So there'll be plenty of opportunity to ask questions from us as well. So just to give you, so we're in the decade of CCF. So this is really important to us. So just to give you a brief history of monitoring with the CCF. So we launched back in 2008. At that point, there was no sort of key structure as to how you monitor your carbon reduction in your communities. And in 2012, we had a review of the Climate Challenge Fund, and a standardised methodology was developed. And that methodology was the carbon calculation process, where you collected your baseline data from your community, you collected your project scenario data, which was just simply, the project scenario was just collecting the carbon emissions as a result of your project. So the baseline would have been larger, the project scenario been smaller. And then the difference between the baseline and project scenario was your project and your community's carbon reduction. And then in 2018, this year, we launched the estimator, the carbon estimator, for groups that are applying to the fund to estimate what their carbon savings would be in their community. And the carbon reporter was developed. So hands up how many projects are funded currently, and how many are just not CCF or just our partners or... Okay, so pretty much, it's the first year of using it as well, so we'll hopefully get some troubleshooting elements out of this. So you should have some Postit notes on your tables. Does everybody have a pen with them? Okay, we've got some pens we can hand out to you. Essentially, what I want you to write on the Postit notes is any key queries, concerns, or comments you have either about the estimator or the reporter. If you're watching this via webcast, if you wanted to let us know what your key queries, your concerns, your comments, just type in your queries, your comments to us, and we'll be monitoring this. So I'll give you a few minutes to just write your key things on the Postit notes, and we'll take this in.
We've got a question over here from Anne Davidson at REAP, and Anne asks, where does the baseline figure in waste come from? And also, for people composting food waste, if they have a log for 2 months from a participant, can they multiply that by 6 to give the figure for 12 months?
Right. First, the baseline from the waste figures. So
yep.
Waste figures, so there's 4 different tables for waste. Your baseline figures, if it's talking about events and other waste activities, so your permanent installations, so your shops, then you're needing to weigh the material that's coming in to your shops or coming into your events. So that's your baseline figure.
You also have to make an estimate of what you think that waste, where you think that waste is going. Sorry, this is. In terms of the other question, which was about
Food waste.
Yes.
food waste, the food waste I think is restricted to one. I think it might be a week. In which case, what they'll need to do is divide it into a week, because we decided we didn't want to ask people for long periods of time. I think it might be useful just to have a quick review of the comments that we've had. We've got quite a kind of like a mixed bag here of relatively kind of generic queries about what is it, how does it work? Okay, so what we're going to try and do in this session is talk through a bit about, not just about how it works, but also about what the underlying philosophy. So why are they like they are? We've got some really quite specific questions about certain things. There's one which I love, which is calculating swap shop textile data seems too easy. What am I doing wrong? You're not doing anything wrong. It should be easy, okay? The aim of these tools was to try and make your life easier, okay? It doesn't always work because this is a very, very complex carbon accounting problem. There was also a brilliant one which I loved, which was the reporter is very basic. How much are we allowed to advance it? It's not that basic. There's an awful lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. We're very happy, and we're talking about the idea of having a kind of an advanced users group to kind of like talk through some of these things and explain and maybe advance some of the things it can do. But at the moment, it's actually doing an awful lot of stuff in an awful lot of unusual and different ways. And again, we'll talk about that in the session. Some of these things are really quite sort of like specific problems. We're not going to be able to deal with all of these in this session, okay? These are some really good advanced questions. But what we will do at the end of this session and after the CCF Gathering is collate all these and put together a kind of questions and answers pack and try and answer some of these questions in a bit more of a specific way.
And absolutely, and some elements that come out of the workshop session today, so this session and the session after lunch will help us put together, so we've already got the guide for the Carbon Reporter, but it'll help us, create that guide for next year and add some troubleshooting elements, things that groups have found, common issues with, and, as Claire was saying, elements of that, so frequently asked questions and, start to build that guide for, future support for CCF projects. Okay, so why develop these tools? Well, first of all, you've got your benefits to CCF groups. It removes the need for projects to design their own estimation methodology, data collection and carbon calculations. So we did have that standardised approach where you would collect the baseline data, you would collect a project scenario, and that would leave your resultant calculations. But this avoids the need to go out and develop your own methods of collecting that data. What is it you're actually collecting? And yeah, this does provide a standard methodology for calculations. You've got your data collection sheets, so you know what the information you need to collect for each theme, and then you pop it into the Carbon Reporter. And benefits to KSB, because as we administer the CCF on behalf of the Scottish Government, it increases the audibility of the figures and quarterly tracking of progress against target savings and ability to provide support. So that's key, as it helps development officers see what your progress is against your outcomes and perhaps helps us provide any other further support to projects as well. And then lastly, the benefits to the Scottish Government too. So it's the ability to report single saving figures, and documented methodology and assumptions are available to scrutiny. So the data that's audited, we're able to say, right, without a doubt, groups have been going out collecting this data, and this is their savings. When groups at the end of your project, we get all the reporters in, we can easily collate those reporters and get a cumulative carbon saving for that and report that to the government. Say CCF, 110 projects this year have saved X amount of tonnes of carbon. It helps support the impact that the fund has in terms of reducing carbon emissions around Scotland's communities. So anyway, I'll hand to Claire.
Right. The first thing is, that's probably kind of slightly weird, is that we've actually got two tools. And you might think, why did you do two tools? Why didn't you kind of combine this into nice one easy spreadsheet? The simple answer is that these were written not at the same time. So we started off with Estimator. Estimator is actually a simpler problem. It didn't feel like it at the time, but I realized it was a simpler problem when I moved on to Reporter, which was an incredibly difficult problem. So Estimator became a kind of single tool, and the design of it is that it's for all groups that are making a CCF application. And what we were trying to do here is we were trying to kind of look at what kind of information a group might have when they're at the application stage. So really, it's not realistic to say, tell us how much carbon your activity is going to save, because you don't know. You don't know all sorts of parameters. You don't know how many miles people do. You don't know how much energy people use in their households. You don't know how much waste they produce. And unless you're prepared to go trawling through all of the national figures to find national averages for these, you're just going to make a best guess. So we decided that a fairer way to do this was for us to make the best guess for you. Estimator is based on national averages and guesstimates, and there's nothing else we can do about that. It's an Excel-based tool with minimal inputs. Excel is probably the worst thing. It's a bit like democracy. It's the worst political system apart from all the others. So Excel was the kind of worst solution apart from all the others. Excel has the ability, the benefit of it is that most people have it, or they have access to it. The disadvantage of it is that it's very, very glitchy and sensitive, as many people have found, and also that it requires you to pass things back and forth. There are long-term solutions to this, but we're still thinking about how those might pan out. So at the moment, this is kind of where it is. But the idea is that there's minimal inputs for groups to put in. What you need to put in is the number of people you think you might be able to work with, or the size of your community building and the initial, and the data that you've got back from RES's opportunities assessment, or the number of people you think you might be able to persuade to reduce their waste. And we've really tried to kind of like make as much of the kind of guesswork our problem, not your problem. So you have the predefined activities. The Scottish Government actually said at one point, what we really want is for groups to be able to type in their activity and you carbon cost it. So they could free type into a box and a carbon number comes out. I did try and gently point out that that's £1 million worth of development in terms of IT. It's kind of like you're talking about, really quite advanced things. They didn't have £1 million. So what we had to do is we had to say, right, reasonably speaking, how do we kind of divide up the sorts of things that CCF groups do? And because we've had to do that, obviously we haven't managed to get every single activity in every single format. So sometimes people are kind of pushing their activities into a slightly, a square-shaped activity into a round-shaped hole. But we can add more activities and we can add more outcomes as we get more knowledge of the sorts of things that people are doing. Expected number of participants, simple percentage estimates, okay? We then move on to Reporter. Reporter was much quicker to write because the timescales were much shorter, but it was much, much harder because all of a sudden you have to basically solve about 25 carbon accounting problems under one roof, which is what we'll talk about later. This is designed for all CCF groups to help with their reporting, and it has to be used by all CCF groups because the idea is that we're trying to unify the approach so that we can reliably take the figures at the end and say to the Scottish Government, notwithstanding the problems and the difficulties in carbon accounting and the variance and the fuzziness, this is your number. Again, Excel-based tool, because by that point, you've kind of got used to it, and so have I. And what you need to do is put in the number of participants, the data that you collected before and after CCF activities. The difficult thing here, the really difficult thing, I think, for most people, and it's coming out in the Postit notes that we've collected there, is that before. Because a lot of the time, the before is before you've got to them. So and we'll talk about the data collection difficulties and some solutions but really there's no There's no simple way around this. In order to calculate carbon savings for projects, you have to have a before and you have to have an after. So this is kind of what the tools are doing. So, Carbon Estimator, key concepts. Predefined activities, we limited. We said, this is what CCF groups do, and this is how you're going to have to talk about it. Again, there's a list, and we can keep adding to the list and amplifying and maybe refining what they talked about. Minimal information, we don't want you to have to find things that you don't know at that stage. If you're going to make guesses, we'll make them on your behalf. And we use public data sets. As far as possible, I've used Scottish data sets. Where I haven't got Scottish ones, I've used UK ones. Where I haven't got UK ones, I've done weird things. Standard factors, okay? Carbon is measured in this, and we've standardized the factors so that one of the problems with the previous methodology was people were pulling factors from very different places because the range of activities is quite unusual. So what we've done is we've kind of really unified that list and made it exactly the same. The list in Estimator is the same as the list in Reporter. So it's kind of like with like. And this is the hardest of them all. We've tried to standardize lifetimes, okay? So if you have a project, there is 3 types of lifetime you can have. You can have a short lifetime, which it lasts for 3 years. You can have a medium one, which lasts for 5 years. And you can have a long one, it lasts for 10 years. And those are locked into the tool. You cannot change them. So even if you are getting solar panels on houses, you're actually only getting a 10-year lifetime on your carbon savings. And that's just the way it is, okay? Again, in the future, it might be that there needs to be variance on this, but at the moment, it's locked in. Carbon Reporter has some key concepts. It shares key concepts with Estimator, but doesn't have all of them. Samples and population. The population in this sense is all of the people you work with. So if you give advice to households, your population is all the households that you advise, which might be 200, which might be 400. Your sample is the number of people you can get data from. So what we've tried to say is that it's not realistic to expect groups to get data from every single person they work with. You just can't do it. Scientists know you can't do it. So we want you to sample. And in the Estimator tool, if you click on the tab, which is called Data Collection, it actually tells you the kind of level of sampling that you need to go for. So it might be, try to get 20%. But the tool, as long as you get some data, the tool can work with it. It might not be amazing. It might be you've only got 3 households out of 400, in which case, you've got a bit of a problem, but we can still work with that data. Quarterly reporting, again, as Claire said, if we get the tools back, we know what's going wrong. We don't want you to get to the end. A lot of the time in previous sort of iterations of the Climate Challenge Fund, it got to the end of the final report and people were like, I've got to make some calculations. And by that point, it's too late. You've not got the right data. You've not got the right things. You can make a horrible mess and it's very, very stressful. And what we wanted to do was take that stress out and enable us to kind of go, right, yeah, we can catch this early if there's a problem. It does mean that there are issues with groups that run 2-year projects where they feel like I'm sitting there with a load of baseline data and I've got no project data, so I've got no numbers. And we can talk about that. Yes?
Multi-various projects, but I run community gardens. And when it comes to quarterly reporting, we've had 4 lots of 1-year funding. And since the funding starts in April, that's a real struggle for the garden aspect. And it is a chunky, aspect of what CCF funds. When it comes to a garden, April's a third of the way through the year, and that's when we're starting. And with our weather conditions and our climate as it is currently, you're finishing up, you can push the season to October. But you're limited. Your last 2 quarters are kind of empty, and you're trying to shoehorn everything you can do into those first 2 quarters. It's an awkward, we've worked around it. I am now the community gardener and community food educator, and we use our winter months to do food education, but that's something that I'm sure all the other community gardeners struggle with, and all the food growing projects struggle with. So that's just something to highlight.
Yeah, growing is, the difficulty in terms of, the length of the funding or, when the fund starts. So all we say is, collect what you can. And all these months, like you said, you're doing food education, you're doing other really important aspects that you know, in addition, the Climate Challenge Fund, we fund projects, and the crux of it is about carbon reduction, but also key importance too is the social benefits that people get from the project. So, but yeah, thanks for highlighting that too.
We also have common timescales. Again, this is really difficult to try and explain to people in a short amount of time. But basically what we're doing is we are annualizing savings. So it doesn't matter where in the project, if you have a 2-year project and you engage with a household at the end of year 2, that's annualized forward. We're constantly saying, right, what does a year's worth of saving from this project look like, and then extend that over a lifetime. We're trying to put together some diagrams to explain this, but as long as you trust that project and lifetime kind of work, and we understand what those concepts are, then that's okay at the moment. Matched pairs. This is a proper geeky stat thing, but basically what we're doing here is we're looking at matched pair data. So if you get a household, you can't have a household as the baseline and a different household as project data. Okay, it doesn't work like that. A line across means that's the same household. Okay, so what we're looking for here is we're trying to match up what they did before and what they did afterwards. The same for food attitudes and behaviour surveys. It's very important to make sure that your households are aligned, so that the answers in the first part and the baseline are the same household that answers the project data. And finally, tons of CO2 equivalent are currency for carbon. It's like the euro. It's like it stops you having to change your money every time you cross a border for most countries. And what this means is that everything has been converted in tons of CO2 equivalent. Okay. Again, the conversions for that are all hidden in the background. They sit in the emission factors. We've also taken a very broad approach to emission factors. So we're taking the biggest emission factors that we can in terms of the boundary that they cover, because what we think is that projects like this are very kind of like, they have long tendrils that stick out into all sorts of places. So what we want to do is try and capture as much of that benefit as possible. But these are all the kind of things that we thought about when we built these tools. We're going to talk about Carbon Reporter, okay? I think quite a few people here have used it already. Can you put your hand up if you have used it? Have used it, yeah. So quite a few people here are already users. That's good. It's like a shopping centre. It's a smorgasbord of carbon problems under one roof, okay? So not every single thing is doing the same thing. So if someone says, well, why is this, why do I get this result in this table and this result in a different table? Because they work off slightly different things. And the fact that they've got a different table means that they're actually a slightly different model. So if you work with communities to do home energy efficiency improvements and help them upgrade, put in insulation and things like that, you use a table called home energy efficiency. If you're doing renewable electricity projects, you use that table. If you're doing renewable heat, you use that table.
And yeah, if you are a community building project, you're working to improve the energy efficiency of your building, or in addition to that, you've got water efficiency, then you use the table in that element.
Community buildings was the simplest of all of them, so it was the first one written. If you are changing food behaviours and attitudes, which is a wide Catholic range of activities, you use that table. And if you're growing food, there's a wee table below it.
And if you're changing the way people travel, so a modal shift, so people are going from the car to cycling, then you want to use the travel less, travel differently table. And then, fuel efficient driver training. It does what it says on the tin. If that's what you're doing, then you use that table.
They should be all relatively straightforward. The one that's tricky is waste. Waste was very tricky anyway. Household waste. If you're working with households to reduce their waste or to increase their food composting or to increase their recycling behaviour, that's the table you want. If you work with a community building, so if you're doing your community building energy and water, you can't stick your waste in that table. It has to go into community buildings waste. If you run events like swap shops, then you use other waste events. if you run a shop, so a continual process of collecting in things and sending it out, use the shops one. I had to split them because I couldn't see how to combine them. Okay, there's a subtle difference in the way that it kind of like looks at how you do things. So basically speaking, these are your options within the tool. You can see now that it doesn't really sort of fit entirely with this outcomes and activities that we had in Estimator, because by the time you've got to this phase, people aren't actually kind of necessarily sticking to the exact activities, because your activities evolve. And so what we're actually talking about here now is just trying to say, look, these are the things that we think save carbon. If you can get some data in for these, we can calculate it for you. This is the tricky bit, because this is the bit that you guys have to do, and this is the collecting the data. So yeah, so splitting it into theme. So you'll have the data collection sheets are online on the Run Your CCF project section, and then carbon reporting and monitoring. So for energy, the data you need to collect, so the energy system that is currently being used, you know, are you looking at electricity? Are you looking at gas, oil? You know, however somebody heats their home as well. The meter readings is important, so you'll need to go through and collect those, because that's the way that essentially it'll use the meter readings and the dates to be able to calculate the savings. And the CCF activity as well. So are you giving home energy efficiency advice? Are you running workshops? There'll be different savings attached to that, just based on the lifetime of the behaviour change of a energy workshop versus home energy advice. And then we've got community buildings, so building occupancy and the gross internal floor area, something that it needs to calculate the space of the building. Has it increased when you've done your energy efficiency improvements? And the building occupancy, has that also increased? Increasing the building occupancy can increase a community building's carbon emissions, even though you've made it more energy efficient because it has been used more. Is that something? The tool actually, what it does with that information is it automatically calculates for you your relative efficiency gains. So rather than you having to work out, well, our energy use has gone up, but our building use has gone up even more, what the tool does is it calculates a relative efficiency saving, so it gives you the credit for the efficiency gains without penalising you for occupancy increases. So all of that is automated. And then again, you put your dates, your meter readings in there as well to help you calculate, and if part of the project, your water consumption too. Food, you've got your kilograms of produce used. That will calculate the savings there. The meter cubed that's under cultivation, that's not used to calculate savings, but that helps us to be able to get a more accurate picture of what the yield is for the future years. Yeah, I've just realised
meter squared.
Actually, it's metre squared.
Metre squared.
Yeah. I put it as a subscript, but I never even looked at it.
That was metre squared.
Yeah, metre squared.
And then, you know, if you're doing things like cookery classes and elements that are changing attitudes and behaviours, then you've got your key questions, your behaviour change questions, your attitude questions as well. Travel, if you're changing, if you're doing modal shift, encouraging a change in the way people travel, you've got the mode of transport, the miles travelled per day, the vehicle type. That's all key to help you, you know, has there been a change in the vehicle type and the mode of transport. For fuel efficient driver training, it's the cost of the fuel used, cost of fuel in pounds per litres to fill up the tank, and the miles travelled. So that one involves quite a lot of different elements to it. You've got your waste, so your type of resource, your weight or bag size if you're doing home waste, the probable disposal route and the new disposal route, that's key to helping it calculate for other waste events and for the shops. It'll ask you what would have happened to that if it wasn't for your project. And then recycling habits questionnaire, that's for the household data collection element. So anyway, it's over to you now. So Claire's going to hand you out some flip chart paper.
If you could stick Post-its on these so we can reuse them for the next session. Reduce our resource use.
Absolutely. What I want you to do is write down any problems that you found when collecting data and any benefits you found to data collection in your project. So we'll give you about 5 minutes to discuss this in your groups and get some feedback. If you're watching this via webcast, think about any of the problems and benefits that you've had when collecting data and just type them into us and we'll collate that. And if you're watching it pre-recorded, then same, just let us know. Just drop your development officer an email and it helps us collate some problems and benefits. Okay, what would be useful to do is go around each group and just give us one problem you've encountered, and we'll go around, we'll get the problems, and we'll go back round and get the benefits. So I'll start with this group here. So just one problem that you've encountered with data collection. Okay. So cultural problems, yeah, when. And have you, what we can do is we can chat about, what the potential solutions to cultural issues could be. Group in the middle, one problem.
Yeah, I guess collecting the baseline in terms of, it being quite specific. We work in secondary schools.
Yep.
Collecting those people that maybe they cycle to school but already walked to school and that's not counting, and you're actually trying to collect very specific data about how long they drive to school and I guess on families' priorities, getting that information from them is very, very low down on their agenda when you're trying to get a whole family to school and then get to work, etc.
Yep, so absolutely. So, I mean, as we say, collect what you can from people, as much data as you can. If you're having, issues like that, there could be potential suggestions that we have to help you. So, these are really useful, these problems. It helps us build in like a troubleshooting guide to data collection, as it were.
Also, if you're finding that you're spending hours collecting data that gives you no carbon savings, because there's no carbon saving from going from walking to cycling. There's just not one. It's the way that the tool is, the way that our model is set up, that's no. So don't collect the data. Yeah. Just leave it. Collect the number of people that you've encouraged to do active travel, but also it might be that shift has enabled them then to cycle in other ways and do other things. So try and, it's looking for the kind of bit that actually gives you the numbers that you need.
And later on, it's okay when you once you pass that barrier, it makes it easier. Starting from
I think it's unusual to find any kind of application or tool that you have to use that doesn't have a kind of a barrier to use. If you do find one like that, then they will have spent an awful lot of money on making it that way and making it as simple and as easy to get into as possible. This isn't simple and it's not necessarily easy. But I think a lot of groups have mentioned that, the reason why we wanted you to send the tool back on a quarterly basis is not that we expect you to get carbon savings in the first 6 months, is that we want to make sure that you've opened the tool and that you put in the data at the front and that you're starting to, because the main barrier to getting started is getting started. And once you've actually opened it 3 or 4 times and kind of, it's like you start to kind of go, right, this is starting to look familiar to me. And I'm starting to, I can see that the name of my data collection sheet matches up with the table that I need to use and things like that. So, but we do need to make kind of maybe a real basic webinar introduction, go into the tool and click on this and try this. But also, don't be afraid to break it. Save yourself a copy and play. You know, the worst you can do is break a copy, in which case you put it in your recycling bin on your computer. So don't be afraid to have a play. The whole point of things like this is that we've always got a backup. So, you know, do feel free, make yourself a copy, obviously, but do feel free to have a play around with it and see what you can do. Group at the back. Access for?
Follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, well, access to meters is, you know, maybe an added difficulty there, but in terms of getting access to people's household to get follow-up data, I mean, some groups have found it really useful where they say to people, they give people text reminders that, you know, send your meter reading in to us, or email your meter reading, or phone it in. Some groups have found that useful, but the access to the meter part, households can't access their meter, that becomes quite difficult. The prepayment meters, yeah.
What we need to do, I think, is put together some guidance, because the thing about meters is that there is an awful lot of variability around what they do. And in actual fact, you can, if someone says to you, well, we use £10 a week of electricity, if we can give some guidance about how you convert that to a meter reading, a simple meter reading, I think that would be useful. People who work with communities that are off gas have the same problem with oil, is that oil tends to be not metered. It tends to be you fill up a tank, and it's very difficult to work out how much you're using. So there are tricks to it, but we know that, you know, these are always going to be tricky bits to get at. And, you know, often the most, you know, the disenfranchised communities that we're working with have got the trickiest metering arrangements. You know, it might be they're in a block of flats and the meter's locked up in a basement and the landlord doesn't let them at it. And, you know, we need to find solutions, easy, simple solutions to get over this.
Nowadays, smart meter is installed in a household, and for that reason, meter reading start from the zero and very low distance. And sometimes because they change the company, that's why it's not possible fast meter reading for the carbon calculation.
Do people have bills that you could look at? No.
Some people have got the smart prepayment service, and they have got a smart meter. For example, I have that, but I don't know the fast meter reading. And another people have got online bill, maybe direct debit, and they never bother with the bill.
So I think there are solutions if you can find any kind of, even if people don't have any idea of the meter readings, is to get a sense of how much they thought they were paying and then we can give some guidance about average kilowatt, how much you pay for a kilowatt hour, and that gives you an ability to change it. But there's just a set of tricks to get you to the point of meter reading and date. So I think that's a take back for us to produce that guidance.
As an energy advisor, I do home visit, so sometimes I'm really confused because it's really very small visit just start from, and they cannot get the fast meter reading.
I mean, it's finding some kind of a clue about what their past energy use might be. You know, again, if we absolutely go back to the really sort of basic, we can have an average household consumption figure, but it becomes, I mean, it gets to the point where it becomes a little bit meaningless doing the calculation at that point. So I think it's kind of, it's also building into your project a plan for collecting that data, because it is quite an important bit to get. But we know that this baseline meter readings for household energy use is a big issue, and we're collecting strategies for this.
Annual consumption is very easy.
Mhm.
But meter reading, some suppliers, they
Yeah.
I think we need to.
Well, I'm conscious of time, so we'll leave the benefits, but what we'll do is we'll have a look at that and we'll take photographs of everything you've done so we know it'll help us produce these guides and make additions to them.
We thought we'd do a very quick troubleshooting. If you find no savings are showing in the summary sheet, make sure that you have put the number of participants in the results tab that you're using. So if you haven't put how many participants you've got in the project, so this is your population, that it won't calculate anything. If you're getting negative carbon savings in energy, home energy, what we're finding is that sometimes, and this is a flaw in the way that the tool was designed, is that you lose the table headings as you get more rows in. So it means that people sometimes get the dates the wrong way round, or they get the meter readings the wrong way round. And that means that the tool calculates it as a negative saving. If you don't have answers to all the food and attitude questions and behaviour questions, that's not a problem, okay? Sometimes you can't get people to fill in the full set of questions. All you need to do is enter the missing answers as neutral for both the baseline and the project, and the tool will do the rest. If you find that your tool is ignoring participants with missing data, that's because it does ignore rows with missing data, okay? So the tool is set up to say, if I don't have complete data for a particular line entry, I'm just going to ignore it, okay? There is one little glitch somewhere in the travel section which we need to fix, which you're aware of, so if you're having problems with that in travel, then let us know. But basically, if you've got missing data in a row and you'll get a flag saying missing data, you need to fill it in to get a carbon saving. And finally, if your community waste project is saving loads of carbon, it's because I made a mistake. And
we're all human.
Yeah. It was the only one we found so far, okay? I forgot to divide through by 1,000, and we will fix this at the auditing stage, okay? we're going to know. I've talked to Alistair, and we've talked about kind of strategies for fixing this. But yeah, sorry. It's one of these things that happens. We wanted to talk a bit about improvements, but actually the good thing is we've had quite a few of these coming out already, and I think in here we've got some things. We've obviously got improvements not only in terms of the guidance, but in terms of the things that the tool can do. The group at the back, I think, made an excellent suggestion, which was that actually it would be useful if there was a little bit more numbers for you guys to see in the tool so the data became more valuable. So, for example, you could see the households that were actually that were using the most energy, and you can see the waste events that are saving the most carbon and things like that, so that you can start to be empowered to use this data to improve your project. So I think those are some really good suggestions, and I have a feeling that in amongst all of this, there's going to be another 100 of really good suggestions. So as far as possible, we will start to collate those and integrate those into the next versions of the reporter and the estimator.
And that's essentially it from us. Your development officer is on hand to help you, so please do use that resource if you've got any questions. If, as you said, if you've got any ways that you think we can improve the reporter, the estimator, the data collection guidance, then do just drop us a message, and we will do our best to accommodate that.
This is the first year that we've really been using these tools, and therefore you guys are the ones who are kind of getting hopefully the benefit, but also some of any of the issues. And we are not in any way kind of like saying this is the final iteration. So please, just tell us things that you want, things that would be useful, things that aren't working, and we will do our best to fix them. Okay.
And
Is there any software or whatever you read on Excel, Word, whatever, or what you get kind of a manual that says how it is done, what it means, what it's, what sort of information you need to take that cell, this section. Do you have a manual?
We've got a guide that would have been sent out at the start of your project by your development officer that kind of run throughs. It's something probably for us to look in the future in terms of guidance for, Yeah, as we're saying, it's the first year of using it, so we're getting a sense of what the challenges might be to then use that to adapt our support that we provide in the future. Yes.
Almost about the data collection and the Excel one.
Mm-hmm.
About the report writing, for instance, some of the question is a repeat question, and about how you want to explain about the question, how you want to, how you are dealing with the problem, what's the benefit. We don't, my colleague, we didn't receive any guideline about the report, not about the Excel and the tools. Okay. Yes, that part we have received. But you go through and see the question, almost the repeat question, asking again and again in the report as well.
What repeat questions are being?
Like the answer is the same. The question is different vocabulary, but the answer is the same.
Okay.
So we try our best. For instance, I
What might do is have a chat to you separately about this. I think what we'll do is, please. Yep.
Another question is challenging.
Mm-hmm.
I put my own personal challenging and then put the
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it'll be worth having a separate chat with you about that. See how we can, work that out. But yeah, anyway, thanks for coming and sitting in. Thanks for viewing on the webcast, and if you're watching it pre-recorded, also thank you very much. Hope you enjoy your lunch and the rest of the day, and I'll probably get to catch up with some of you at some point.
Thanks very much.